All right, hello. How's everyone doing today? Good, good. Some of you falling asleep in the audience? I'm kidding. Well, I'm Izzy. I'm so glad I get to be here today. Today, I'm going to be wrapping up our series on salt and light by finishing with this fourth sermon where I'm going to talk about how we can be the salt and light to the world through the power of our words. But before I start, I wanted to ask a question. Who here has heard of the California wildfires that happened around January of this past year? Yeah? Some of you guys? Yeah. Well, what a lot of people don't know is that these California wildfires, it was a crazy fire. It was a fire that just devastated so many cities in the area, and it's actually recorded in history now as one of the most devastating fires of all of Los Angeles history. But what's crazier is that these fires actually reached my school. So if you go to the next slide, these are kind of the newspapers that are coming out at the time. You know, Pepperdine, we're all in the library, all these crazy things happening during this California wildfire. And if you go to the next slide, this is the story of how it kind of started. So me and my roommate, Madison, we were just hanging out. This is a picture right outside our dorm room, essentially. And we were looking out, and personally, when I was looking at it, I was thinking, oh, what a beautiful sunset today. You know, like, you got the orange colors and everything, it looks great. And then it kind of progressed a little bit. I was like, oh, you know, this looks a little strange for a sunset, but it was still pretty. Okay, and then all of a sudden, someone comes banging on our door. So then me and my roommate, we're going downstairs. We opened the door, and it's one of our neighbors. And he goes, there's a fire, there's a fire. You know, we're like, what are you talking about, there's a fire? And the craziest thing was, finals was the next day. We were trying to go to bed early so we could go to our finals the next day, and all of a sudden, there's this fire warning. And at the same time that he says that, our phones get these notifications of, everyone come down to the library. We need to take evacuation, take shelter. So that's me and my roommate, happily making our way down to the library. Because at this point, you know, the fire still looks kind of nice. We weren't thinking that it was anything big. So this is me and my friends. We're playing card games in the library. We're having the time of our life. And then all of a sudden, the smoke smell just becomes overwhelming. It's overpowering. Everyone can't breathe, so they are handing out these N95 masks. So we have these on, and we're like suffocating in the library. But then the worst part of it was this picture right here, when you see the actual fire outside the window. That's when we realized, like, oh, you know, something's actually really going on. So if you go to the next slide. Okay, so this is just a couple moments later. So we see that initial, like, little spark outside, and all of a sudden, and now, like, it looks like we're, like, in the apocalypse. And this video is not going to play in the middle, but if it were to play, you guys would be shocked just to see, it looked like the fire was catapulting towards the window, and there was, I will never forget, our student body president yelled on the top of her lungs in that moment, our school is on fire, our school is on fire. And the whole library just went crazy. So you go to the next slide. Yeah, so then we stayed overnight in that library, you know. We were trying to sleep through the fire. And then this middle photo, the red fire, that photo I took on my own iPhone, just through the window. That was the state of our school at the time. And you can see in this picture afterward, it just devastated everything. Thankfully, our Pepperdine buildings were okay because it was pretty fireproof. But in terms of the actual city itself, our favorite restaurants burned down. Our favorite ice cream shop just down the street burned down. One of my friends' homes burned down. Everything was gone. And the craziest part after all this happened was that there was a news article that came out about the cause of the fire. Because everyone was wondering, what was the cause of the fire? And this article speculated that this whole fire, this whole devastation that occurred, happened because of one man in his backyard who took a spark to light some fireworks for New Year's Eve. That was the speculation. It was that all this destruction, all the livelihoods lost, all the trauma caused, was from one tiny spark lit by one man, maybe a couple men, in their small backyards. That man probably underestimated the destruction his tiny spark could cause, but that's all the heavy winds needed at the time to create the devastating fire that wrecked our whole city. And all I could think about afterward was this: how could something so small cause so much destruction? One tiny spark changed everything. And as I was reading our passage for today, I realized that's exactly what James says about our words. Let's look at James 3:5-8. It says, "Consider what a great forest is set on fire by a small spark. The tongue also is a fire, a world of evil among the parts of the body. It corrupts the whole body, sets the whole course of one's life on fire, and is itself set on fire by hell. All kinds of animals, birds, reptiles, and sea creatures are being tamed and have been tamed by mankind, but no human being can tame the tongue. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. Our words may seem small, and oftentimes we underestimate its impact. Just like the man who started the fire probably underestimated the horrible consequences his spark would cause. But James calls the tongue a restless evil full of deadly poison, capable of causing great destruction. And so just like that spark that started a fire that tore through my campus, I believe also one word can tear through someone's life. Which leads to the first truth I want you to remember today, that our words have the power to destroy. Just think about your own life. I want you to think about your own life and think to yourself, what is the most hurtful thing someone has ever said to you? I really want you to take a moment to think. Think about a conversation, a sentence, something someone said that hurt you, and maybe it still lingers. Can anybody think of one? I know that I have one. So a couple of years ago, I had this guy best friend. And this guy best friend knew everything about me. He knew what I liked to do, what I didn't like to do. He knew my strengths. He knew my weaknesses. He knew all the areas that I fell short. And there was one day we were in a Bible study. I was leading Bible study at my school. He was there with me. And as we were walking out of Bible study, he kind of started making some strange comments. He started to say things like, gosh, like those people probably think you're so holy, leading Bible study like that when they don't know what you've done. And it kind of went back and forth until he said the one sentence that really wrecked my life for the next couple years. He said, Izzy, I know you. And if those people knew the real you, they wouldn't trust you to lead them because the real you that I know is not good. When I heard those words, the whole foundation of my identity was shaken. I mean, imagine your best friend telling you that at your core, they think that you're not a very good person. I mean, for me to hear those words coming from a person I thought knew me best crushed me to my core. And I remember holding on to those words for years. It would echo in my mind, often convincing me that because I did a few sinful things in the past, that I could never be worthy of love from other people, and most especially from God. And I'm wondering, maybe you've had a moment like that too, when someone's words left a mark that never fully faded, when a small spark became a fire that you couldn't put out. That's the destructive power our words can have on us. And they come in many forms. Here's just a few that you might be able to identify with. I want you to just take a second and look through these. Which of these words or type of words have you experienced yourself, or maybe you've done to somebody else? Maybe you're looking up there and you're thinking, I've done all of the above. All of these are forms of destructive words that hold great power. I mean, let's just take the first one, for example, gossip. Who all agrees here that gossip is bad? Who would all agree that gossip destroys? Pretty much all of us. I think we can all agree that gossip destroys. And how often does gossip start? Doesn't gossip often begin with something one person said about someone else that was either kind of mean or just untrue? Gossip always starts with a small spark. Do you guys know that one telephone game? The one where, you have a sentence and then you pass it on to the next sentence, or next person and the next person, next person? And then what happens to the person at the very end who has the last sentence? Isn't it often very different than the sentence that first started the sequence? And it's kind of funny when it's in a game. Everyone's laughing. They're like, oh, how did that happen? Like, you changed so much. But when that same distortion happens in real life, when someone's story, when someone's reputation or identity is twisted and spread around, it's not so funny anymore, is it? It's actually devastating. And it's kind of crazy how quickly these things escalate. I mean, think about how easy it is to say something funny at someone else's expense. Or think about the moments we jump into gossip without even realizing we're doing it. James says for a reason that no human being can tame the tongue, and I think he's right. I just want us to think, how many of us, when we're in a group with our friends, have wanted to contribute something to the conversation to feel included? Right? Everyone wants to feel included. And to do that, we brought up gossip or something juicy or interesting just to get people to pay attention to us. Or how many of us have been told a secret by a close friend, and they told us not to tell anybody. But you know what we did? We went behind their back and told somebody, maybe because we just wanted to see their reaction, or because we just couldn't keep it in. And I'm sure all of us can relate to this last one. What about when someone makes us mad or frustrated? How many of us have just blurted out words carelessly? Words that sting. Words that we wish we could take back. But here's the thing. Our words, they don't just appear out of thin air. They actually flow from somewhere. When we speak out of our need for affirmation, our hunger for attention, or out of unchecked anger or emotion, they actually expose what's going on inside of us. Which leads to the second truth I want you to remember today, that our words reveal what's actually going on in our hearts. James continues, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, this should not be. Can both fresh water and salt water flow from the same spring? Can a fig tree bear olives or a grapevine bear figs? Neither can a salt spring produce fresh water. And I love this saltwater illustration because it's so true. Why do we go to the ocean? We go to the ocean to swim. Do we go to drink the water? No, because the ocean water is salty. And so we wouldn't go to the ocean with the intention of filling up our water bottles with salty water to drink because we know that it's not drinkable. The ocean is full of salt because that's what it's made of. And in the same way, if our words are constantly filled with anger and pride and gossip or unforgiveness, what does that say about what's in our hearts? What comes out of our mouths is always connected to what's rooted inside of us. And so when we gossip, it's not just about the drama. We're revealing a heart that finds satisfaction in comparison and control. A heart that feels better when others look worse. Or when we curse or snap in anger, it's not just a bad habit. It shows a heart that's impatient, prideful, or hurting. And the words we speak in frustration expose that we haven't surrendered those emotions to God. Or how about when we tear down others with our sarcasm and judgment? It shows a heart that might be insecure and craving attention or trying to protect itself by pushing others away. See, the words we speak are like mirrors. They show us what we might not want to admit about what's going on inside of us. I remember a time a few years ago when I found out some pretty crazy drama about one of my friends. And I was so excited to tell this drama to my friends. So you know what I did? I called up all my friends and I was like, guys, I have the craziest thing to tell you guys. And so I gathered them all up and we were together. And then I start telling the drama, and then all of a sudden, one of my friends who was there stopped me. And he goes, Izzy, stop. And I remember being like, hey, no, let me just share it. It's so good, you'd want to hear it. But he said, no, stop. And he said, I don't want to hear it. None of us do. There's so many other things that we can talk about. Let's not gossip about other people. And for some reason, he said it so kindly. He wasn't trying to act overly righteous or anything like that. He was simply so filled with the Spirit and with the love of God that he didn't even want to be near that gossip. And I think that's the cool part of being so close with Jesus. The closer you are to his purity and wholeness, and the more you let that fill you, the more sin and evil are actually detestable to you. The more you run away from it. The more you can't even be in his presence. And that's what I realized. My friend was so close to Jesus that just the presence of my sin entering the conversation, he didn't want to be near it. And I remember being so convicted in that moment because at the time, I was a strong Christian too. And I would have said that I shared the same beliefs as my friend. But at that moment, I was filled with salt water. I hadn't been reading my word daily. I hadn't been aligned with God. God was nowhere in the forefront of my mind. I had been more concerned with the drama of other people and wanting to make my friends amused than I was actually focused on honoring God and using my words to honor the people around me. And sometimes it's like that. Our heart conditions are so subtle. In this particular case, it wasn't that I was this evil person who had this evil intent to bring this person down. No, it was that my heart simply wasn't filled with Jesus. And because of that, my tongue became a restless evil, filled with poison, capable of bringing great destruction. Which is why I believe James says we cannot tame our tongue by ourselves without God, because we are by nature sinners. We're by nature gossipers. The Bible even says in Jeremiah 17:9 that the heart is deceitful above all else. We can't just stop gossiping because we want to stop. We can't just stop cursing because we want to stop. We actually need to recalibrate our hearts by filling them with Jesus. We have to go to his word. We have to go to prayer and ask Jesus to fill ourselves with his love and his compassion and his forgiveness and his grace. And not just one time, not just on Sundays when we come to church. We actually have to do that every single day. And maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, I'm a Christian. I love God. I go to church. Of course my heart is filled with Jesus. But that's not how it works. For me, someone who's committed to Jesus, who wants to become a youth pastor of all things, if I don't start my day in the word and in prayer with God, aligning my heart and my spirit with God, I'm far more prone to gossip, to lash out, to speak out of pride. Because the reality is, and I'm going to be honest with you guys, is that being kind is not always natural for me. And I would say it's not natural for us. Being forgiving is not my first instinct. Giving compliments to people, that's something I have to be intentional about. And that's the reality we face as sinners in a broken world. We aren't wired to speak words of life. Think about it. When someone gives you a compliment, doesn't it kind of make you feel uncomfortable? I was talking to Pastor Sue the other day, and she told me that she's wired to be more critical. And so when she receives a compliment, she actually has a visceral reaction to it. She doesn't know how to respond. And I know it's not just Pastor Sue. So many of us are like that. We receive a compliment, and it's almost like our brains go haywire. We don't know what to do with that positive energy or the words coming in. And it's because we live in a world where more critical, fault-finding, and hateful words are the norm. And they're shared not just face-to-face, but online, through your social medias and your text conversations, everywhere. And so when we make the decision to intentionally turn to God and ask for his Holy Spirit, what we're doing is we're actually recalibrating our hearts, and we're even overturning the cultural norm. That's why compliments always go a lot farther than we think. And it's also why we must say kinder things more often, because they're both harder to be received and easier to be forgotten than words of deep pain. And so for me, it's a daily choice that I make to turn to God, go on my knees, and ask him to fill me so that I might be able to speak words of life. It's a daily decision to surrender my tongue. And it reminds me of the Israelites in the wilderness. Every day, God gave them manna, bread from heaven, but he always gave them only enough for one day. Did he give them enough for tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that? No, he always gave them enough for one day. And it makes me think about maybe that's what Jesus meant when he wanted to be in relationship with us. It's not just a one-time transactional thing. It's actually something that we have to go to God every single day. Every single morning we ask for his mercies. Every single morning we ask for his grace. Maybe that's why he says his mercies are new every morning. And I think our faith works in a similar way, where it's not that God is stingy and is wanting to withhold all these good things from us. It's that the beauty of walking with God is found in trusting him one day at a time, relying on his mercy today, coming back to him tomorrow. And that's the awesome thing that happens when we fill our hearts with Jesus daily, is that we begin to speak like him. Luke 6:45, it says, a good person produces good things from the good that God has put into his heart, and an evil person produces evil things from the evil that is in his heart. For out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And this is always one of my favorite verses because it's so interesting. See, for the evil things, right? It says that the evil person just has evil things in his heart. But for the good things, God actually has to put the good things in his heart. It's almost as if evil things are easier to say. It's almost as if evil things are more natural for us to say. It's easier for us to speak evil words, but because of God, we have the opportunity to allow God to fill us and change us, which leads me to my final point, that our words, when filled with the Spirit of God, have the power to give life. Proverbs 18:21, it says, the tongue has the power of life and death. Those who eat of it will eat of its fruit. And so I know we've talked a lot today about the power of words for destruction, but the truth I hope to leave you with today is that just as much as our words can destroy, they can also bring abundant life. And so I want you to take a moment and ask yourself the opposite question. What is the kindest thing someone has ever said to you? And it's okay if this one is harder for you to think of. Again, our brains are more wired to hold on to the negative than the positive because we hear it more. But I'm curious, does a moment come to mind? Do you remember a particular compliment you might have received? Or a time when someone said just the right thing to encourage you at the perfect moment? Or maybe you can think of a person who's always just so encouraging and uplifting wherever they go. Can anybody think of a compliment or a word or a person? Yeah, some of us. So this here is my friend Faith, and she's one of my friends at Pepperdine, and she is probably one of the most joyful people I know. We're talking about salt and light today, right? But she is the epitome and the representation of what I believe salt and light is in this world. And I remember one day, I went up to her and I asked her, I was like, Faith, how are you so kind? How are you so bright? How are you so nice to everybody? And this is what she told me. She told me that one day, several years ago, God had convicted her to give a new person a compliment every single day. And ever since that day, several years ago, she's given a new compliment to a new person. And the cool part is that, sometimes she compliments something like, oh, I love your hair or I love your shoes. And sometimes that compliment goes deeper. I love the way that you never make anyone feel left out. And the crazy part of this is that what this did was it not only just made her a kinder person to share more compliments, but it actually rewired her mind. She said when she started waking up in the morning with the mindset of, how can I bless these people and actually tell them in order that they might be blessed? She said that naturally she was less gossipy. She was less judgmental. She was less impatient because she was constantly looking for ways to see the best in people and not only see it, but actually tell them in order that she might bless them. Her daily practice over the course of years became a habit that began changing her own heart. And so it's funny because our words don't just reflect what's in our hearts, it actually also transforms our hearts. When we speak bad words, it doesn't just reveal a broken heart that hurts others. James says in our passage that it corrupts our own bodies. It ultimately destroys us because our hearts change for the worse in the process. But luckily, in the same way, the opposite is also true. That as we begin to be intentional about speaking words of life, our hearts begin aligning more with Jesus and begin transforming in a similar way. My youth pastor in the past always told me something that used to boggle my mind. She said, you can't stay angry at someone who you're on your knees praying for every single day. And that quote always used to get to me because I was like, why would I go on my knees to pray for the person that's hurting me? But believe it or not, every time I went on my knees, and I didn't just pray those prayers of, God, I just pray that person would be nicer to me and that they would know their sin and all that. But when I actually started praying prayers of, God, bless this person and bless their family and all the things that they do. God, would you show this person unconditional love? My heart naturally started to shift. And that's the power of positive words. Proverbs 16:24, it says, pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones. Pleasant words are healing. Proverbs 12:25, it says, anxiety in the heart causes man depression, but a good word makes it glad. And so it's not just that our kind words feel good or make us happy. I truly believe that when we speak words of life, God can multiply the impact of those words beyond what we could ever imagine. If Satan can take one careless sentence and use it to destroy, then how much more can Jesus take one loving sentence and use it to heal, restore, and even save? And that's exactly what we see on the cross. Remember when Jesus was hanging there, moments away from death? You guys remember that moment? Well, right before that moment, Jesus was beaten by the Roman soldiers. They were spitting at him. They were taking this club encrusted with metal and glass pieces, and they were whipping it on his back. And then after they had whipped it, torn up his whole back, they gave him this giant cross, wooden cross to carry up a hill. And after he carried this wooden cross up the hill, they crucified him on his own cross, put nails on his hand. He was crucified there, shoved a crown of thorns on his head. And you know what Jesus said at the pinnacle of that moment? In the pinnacle of that distress and that torture and that humiliation, do you know what Jesus said? Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That's what Jesus said. That when he was on the cross at the pinnacle of his death, that's what he said. Instead of yelling down curses or whatever we might have done, Jesus decided to speak words of forgiveness. And the crazier part is that at the time there were two criminals next to Jesus on the cross. And these criminals were also hurling insults at Jesus. And after Jesus said those words, interestingly enough, one of those criminals seems to change his tune. And he actually looks at the other criminal and says, hey, this man has done nothing wrong. And then he turns to Jesus and says, Jesus, remember me when you enter your kingdom. And that's when Jesus famously answers him, truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise. Jesus' words in that moment, his words of Father, forgive them, forgiveness and grace, I believe those words saved that criminal on the cross. Because imagine, what if Jesus instead hurled all these insults? Okay, imagine if he was yelling and screaming and cursing in pain like everybody else. Imagine if he tried so hard to defend himself before everyone watching. I'm convinced that that criminal on the cross would have watched him and mocked him too, like the other criminal. But something about Jesus' words of life in that moment moved him. It perhaps moved him all the way to his salvation. And I believe it's similar with the words that we speak ourselves. Okay, so I want to challenge us right now. What kind of impact are our words having? When we walk into a room, do our words make people feel loved and seen? Or do they sting, leaving little burn marks that people carry with them? See, our words can be the spark that starts a wildfire or the spark that brings someone back to life. You never know when a simple word of kindness and forgiveness and grace or encouragement and love might be the thing that keeps someone going. Or you never know when your decision to stay silent instead of gossiping might restore someone's trust. You never know when your decision to speak out of love will heal someone who's been hurt by words of destruction in the past. You know the story I mentioned at the beginning? How my friend's words shattered the core of my identity and how his words stayed with me for years? Well, I want to end my message today by sharing the conversation that God used to heal that wound. It was actually with another one of my closest friends at Pepperdine. And at the time, I did something to this friend that unintentionally hurt them. And I would have understood if this friend didn't want to be friends with me anymore. But for some reason, this friend kind of continued to be my friend and treat me really well. So one day, I just ended up asking them, hey, like, why do you still want to be friends with me? Why do you trust me? And I'll never forget their response. Because this friend started with the same line that my guy friend started with. They said, Izzy, I know you. And from there, they said, and I know and I believe in your character that you would never mean to hurt me. And so, of course, I trust you because I know who you are. And I'll remember that good word from my friend forever. Because at that moment, that word of life overpowered that word of destruction from the past. And it was crazy because to that friend, I don't even think they took it that seriously. Those were just words they said matter-of-factly. But for me, those words were healing and powerful. And so, Grove, let's use our words to build and restore and love, not to break, tear down, or destroy. This whole series was being about the salt and light of the world. And our words are such a powerful witness to do just that. But the thing is, we have to be intentional about it. Who here knows Sadie Robertson? Yeah, good, a lot of us. Sadie Robertson, she's one of my favorite preachers, and she said something really important that has stuck with me to this day. She said, God calls us a lot of things in the Bible. He says we're loved. He says we're chosen, we're valued, we're forgiven, we're worthy. You can probably list so many other things that God calls you. And most of these things are things that we can just simply receive. I'm loved? Great, I'm loved. I'm forgiven? Awesome, I'm forgiven. But she said there's one identity that Jesus calls us in the scriptures that requires more than just accepting. It actually requires action. And you know what that one identity is? It's when Jesus says, you are the light of the world. Because look at these lights up here. If the lights were off, does it do anything? Sure, there's still a light, but they're not actually having any function. So to actually be a light of this world, we can't just accept it. We actually have to step into that calling. And so today, when you step out these doors and head to the lobby and talk to your friends and parents and siblings, be intentional about how you speak. Speak from a place of love and accept God's calling and step into being the light of the world like he has called you to. Because if you do, I believe that the brokenness of our world, the ashes caused by the fires we speak every day, and the burn marks that still permeate our earth will slowly fade through our words of life to reveal lush greenness, beauty in the ashes, and healing in seemingly impossible places. These are actually pictures post-fire at Pepperdine. This one is just a couple months after the fire, and already you're starting to see green come out. Okay, and then in this next picture here, it's almost the green's almost all back. And I took a picture on this last one here because you see yellow flowers in the back budding and growing. And as we did more research about fires, we realized that fire is actually essential. You need that to grow, and it actually produces greater greenness and lushness after. And so, likewise, with our words, even if we've used them in the past to create a lot of destruction, I hope you know that because of Jesus, they're also capable and able to create abundant life if we choose to use them well. So let's use them well. Let's pray. Dear God, we just thank you for today. Lord, we thank you for the privilege that we get to be in this room, God, and that I get to share this message that you've placed on my heart. And I pray that as we go out into our lives, God, into every relationship that we enter, in every situation that we find ourselves in, that we would always pay attention to our words, God, and know that you've placed these words, you've given us this tongue, not for evil, God, not to start a bunch of wildfires of destruction, but to actually use them for good, to use them for life. Jesus, I pray that we would mirror the words that you said on the cross when you spoke forgiveness over your enemies, Jesus. Would we speak with that same forgiveness, that same love, that same passion, that same kindness to others, God? And would you continue to recalibrate and cultivate our hearts that it might align more like you, God, that we might be a blessing and light and salt to the ends of the earth and beyond. We love you and we praise you. And in all these things, we pray in your name. Amen.